CHS. So, like I read somewhere, like E.P. Thompson says that if people have lost the political battles, then we as a historian must not defeat them by not telling this. That they try to like reframe the questions of the local movements. So it is also about the international politics that the like US and the Israel and other Western countries which openly conspired against the Iran. So it also gave the coalition of this priest and the bureaucratic ruling class in Iran a lifeline to rule, because on the name of like country and like to maintain its sovereignty, they crushed the local movement. So what is the way for these local movements and uprising in this in this national politics, international politics, right?
Political alliances. So you were talking about how Iran's as a role as a state actor in axis of resistance. So Iran is among the few, I think, along with Yemen, Houthi Yemen. I don't know if it's a state actor at that point. So how, like, in when it comes to the case of U.S. hegemony and Israel in Middle East genocide, all this, we are in some sense forced to ally with the axis of resistance, and Iran is a big state actor in the axis of resistance. So in that sense, like, how are we to move forward in making such alliances? Like, are we to like, so there's also this Western hegemony in media, and even in Indian case there is the like Hindu nationalist hegemony in like mainstream media. So like the next question you get asked is that you are supporting the axis of resistance. So do you support like Iranian governance, or like Islamic Republic, the state missionary, or like they just straight up go to, do you support the Ayatollah, or like whatever. So how are we to, like, this question comes up, right? Do you condemn? Do you? So how are we to tackle this question? Thank you.
To go back to the first question.
Like appropriation of this local movement by the West.
To go back to the first question. So what happened was what has happened in 2023 was a very plain betrayal of the Iranian people by the West, right? Because what the international community at large, China, Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia is an adversary, you know, of Iran in international relations in the region, but also the Western states in the international community. What they have done, starting early 2023, and this was, you know, I think crucial in the crushing of the uprisings, was that they take advantage of what the Iranian people have accomplished, which was to weaken the Iranian state at an existential level. They took advantage of that in order to negotiate with the Iranian state on the nuclear program, because the Iranian state does only negotiate when they're in position of power of weakness. And to negotiate with the Iranian state and kind of betray the Iranian people, but also taking advantage of what they accomplished. You know, so it's not only because usually when I talk in France, people say, you know, France, because we are the country of the human rights, we have a moral duty to side by the uprisings. And I answer, no, it's not your, no one asks you to do, you know, a moral duty or an ethical value. Just don't take all the advantages. Take advantage of everything that the Iranian people have done and achieved for you in order to negotiate for your interests. So this is what has been done. So basically, it's in this sense, if you understand it in this sense, this movement has been really stolen. The advantages have been used by another set of state actors. That's where the international community, which could not achieve what they achieved in terms of negotiation if the Iranian state had not been weakened that way by their own people. But by negotiating, they reinstituted the Iranian state as an actor in the international game. They said how much they wanted the stability of the Islamic Republic, and by doing so, they showed, although what we call maybe like the gray portion of the population, the silent majority, the ones maybe whom everyday bread is linked also to the state, they showed them that they had no interest in joining the resistance or wanting the destabilization of the state. And this is why I say, internal and external factors are linked when you talk about the success or the failure of a revolutionary movement. And the fact that it's revolutionary for me is different from the fact that it actually achieved, came to completion or not. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, to some extent.
To some extent. For the question of alliances, well, that's exactly the thing. I think that's one of the, as I say, one of the feminist legacy in terms of political thought is beyond binaries, to think about de-alignment as a possibility that is offered to us as well. So we don't only have to align. We can promote, unalignment or de-alignment as a way to exert our global also citizenship, in the sense that we can be conscious. We can understand how also the Iranian state is using pro-Palestinian propaganda discourse beyond, the facts, beyond the real help. It is using its pro-Palestinian rhetoric as an ideological tool, and it has been doing so for the last maybe 4 decades. So it's not, and if we compare the way the Iranian state has used the rhetorics of being pro-Palestine to what actually it has done for Palestine and Palestine liberation, we see that it's the rhetorics are inflated. So it's becoming aware of all those uses and those discourses can help us, and also the way to a way to de-align would be to actually be on the side maybe of the principles rather than so if what is the reason, for instance, I'm saying it the other way because it's more easy to understand. For instance, the Israeli state has been presented as feminist because there were women in the Israeli army, and because it was fighting so and so, Islamist resistance. So, and in this way we don't have problem understanding where is the problem, but it works both ways actually. But if we know what is feminism, feminism is rooted, the idea of feminism is rooted on the idea of equality of life, between men and women. This principle of equality of life cannot suffer any principles of nation, ethnicity, or caste. So we cannot have a colonizer, genocidal state that is feminist, because it doesn't value lives. So you cannot at the same time not value certain life and fight for the equality of men and women. So this is exactly, and the same is happening with the Islamic Republic. You cannot fight in the name of justice for the liberation of a people and be the internal colonizers of your own ethnic minorities, Kurdish, Baluchis. There was, on the 30th of September 2022, there was a massacre of the Baluchi people who came out of the mosque after the Friday prayer, and more than 100 people were shot dead on the spot by snipers of the Sepah in one day. So, you know, what is the value of life, and what is your idea of the quality of life? On which principle do you root your defense of the Palestinian people as an axis of resistance? What resistance are you talking about? So I think that we can, you know, as citizens, we can still anchor our fights in the ideas rather than in the political actors that claim them, because they are the one who betrayed them in the first place. And it's our de-alignment, it's the fact that we refuse feminism to Israel, we refuse the defense of justice to Iran. This is, I think, where we have a role to play, because we are not, you know, we're not state in any case. We don't have, you know, lots of, you know, we're not invited in those forums. But as citizens, we can build coalitions of opinions. We can build, we can share stories, build collective indignation and shared values. So I think this is also quite important.
Thank you, Makarami, for your wonderful insight. But apart from book discussion, I would say, could you please shed some lights on your methodology? Because as an anthropologist working from outside Iran, what methodological and ethical challenges did you face in documenting this movement? And the next question would be, how do you ensure your analysis remain rooted in the perspective of those directly involved, whether your methodology involved primary research or secondary research on those movements? Thank you so much.
Thank you for this wonderful lecture. So, I mean, the moment you mentioned something about the Foucault's insight, where there is the ruptures of the revolution start exactly where you have powers working on. So it reminds me of a similar case which happened in India. So in India we had a widespread movement which was basically against the state for dictating whether or not to wear hijab. So, but the point that I'm raising is that, for example, you're saying that it happens is precisely in the moments where you have an imposition happening. So why is this resistance happening mostly against the state? Why not against the body of the traditions, which basically upon which legitimizes the state to govern in a particular manner? Why is not raising against the particular? And the second question is that, see, 1979, which is a kind of a rupture in Iran. So you see Raza Shah's regime, which was politically pretty, pernicious in terms of, I mean, there was no political freedom, but socially it was much more emancipatory, even if we make some comparisons, not in absolute terms. But post 1979 it has become much more, the scope of political and social freedoms has been cut down. It has been their lifestyles has been cut down. So why is it happening when you have a persistence of this regime, which is something, it has become a permanent of the sort, which was not seen in case of Raza Shah? So why are you not witnessing a kind of a social outbreak as it happened in 1970? Why not an reenactment of 1979?
Very wide questions, so I will have try to answer them not too long. Thank you for the question on methodology. Actually, I wrote this book because I previously tried to design a methodology to work at a distance. And since I had those tools, because I've thought about them and tried to experiment them to work on the 79 revolution and its aftermath, then I had kind of some tools at my disposal to look from afar. So first, why am I working at a distance and not in Iran? Because I cannot go back to Iran. Since 2010, since I've published my first book on state violence and prison massacres in Iran. So there are two ways, I think, of doing also. When you're a scholar, when you're a researcher, you can either respect the red lines in order to guarantee access to the field, keep access to your field, But then you have to avoid talking about certain subjects. And this is precisely why, because anthropologists need to do empirical fieldwork, and doing fieldwork requires to, respect the red lines. This is precisely why the question of state violence has not been really touched upon by scholarship. So it remains a blind spot. So the history we have from the Iranian Revolution and its aftermath is quite different from the experience of the Iranians themselves. Because what is missing here is the subjects that are too sensitive to be exposed in a book by a scholar that would lose access to their field afterwards. So then we have this challenge to the production of knowledge that is how much, what kind of knowledge do you produce when you accept certain frontiers instituted by power, and you accept them in order to protect the possibility of producing further knowledge. So it's a very complicated, it's a kind of a fold, It's a very complicated challenge that we have, and I feel, and this is why I'm working in this field for a few years like this, it's again, Foucault, it's a question of problematizing, setting the problem right, framing your problem. And the problem has not so much been framed in this term. We're just like, social scientists, empirical scientists were just not talking about those subjects, but they were not saying why they were not talking about them. So the idea was to design a method, was to say, okay, the red lines themselves would be my object of study. I'm trying to understand how come that the public, that the state-society relationship has been designed, has been shaped through this notion of red lines that is very emic, which means that it comes from the people in Iran. They say the red lines, but interestingly enough, social scientists, political scientists have not written on red lines. It was something that popular people in the streets, and activists talked about, the red lines, but it was not a concept. So I tried to think about it, around it, and came to the conclusions that, okay, I don't want to navigate the red lines, I am crossing them, happily. And I'm crossing them, and since I'm crossing them, I know that I don't have access to them. So now, how can I work? So then, a way of working is first studying the red lines themselves, as I say, as a kind of socialization. How Iranian people are socialized. It's a social knowledge. It's a way it's a political subjectivation. The understanding where the red lines are, updating them, what are the soft red lines, what are the hard red lines, how to navigate them, etc., is a way of being constituted as an Iranian citizen under the Islamic Republic. And so I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at that through interviews, etc., but it helps me understand, the state-society relationship and the political participation and the regime. And this is exactly why I can see how the veil is the grammar of revolt and a way of changing the red line to the barricade on which you will, go and say, the big F word to the state. So this is exactly because I did this work that I had these specific lenses through which I could look at that uprisings. And the method was my method on the longer term on the Iranian Revolution is to use the archives and what I call the counter archives, the scattered, fragmented archives that exist everywhere, also in diaspora, or are hidden in Iran, and to understand how they are produced, what is their contextualize them, to do an ethnography of the archive, to assemble them, and to see what kind of counter memories they are bringing. And it's very important also to understand that I'm not only talking about collective amnesia, for instance, of how the Islamic Republic was instituted after the Iranian Revolution. It was a long struggle. It was a bloody struggle. It was not just the will of the people that gave birth to the Islamic Republic. It was also a seizure of power in the hands of a very specific group of radical clergy and the guardians of the revolution. So when I'm looking at the counter memories that allow to write this counter history as well, I'm not looking at a collective amnesia versus counter narratives. I'm looking at how these counter memories are part of the social forgetting, also of the revolution, which means that you don't have, it's not black and white, it's not total oblivion, total forgetting versus, you know, the historical truth. It's different memories that are at war. It's different, and I'm really looking at how they compete with each other and what kind of legitimacy they build for the state, but also for how rebellious cells, how struggling, you know, activists anchor their actions within longer frame, you know, genesis of resistance that go back sometimes to decades long, right? So I'm using a lot of data that is available on the internet as well. I'm using like real archives that are, you know, but also a lot of data that are available through the internet. And for this data, I'm contextualizing them as if they were archives, which means, and this is what I did for the uprisings. I'm using, for instance, Telegram channels, because Telegram channels don't have this algorithm thing that your social network wall can have. It's a Telegram channel, and you can also archive. You can save all the videos, you know, of a certain Telegram channel. So Syrian activists, for instance, also have been using a lot of Telegram channels. When you do that, I don't use the videos and the pictures and the narratives that are produced in these channels. I don't use them as first-hand material, because I'm not on spot, but they are produced, and I use them as if it was me who recorded. No, I'm not using them like that. I'm using them as archives. So an archive is a set of documentation that you receive, that you have in your hand, and the way this documentation is organized is due A, to a certain amount of chance, and B, what is preserved, what is not, what the mouse will eat and what it will not eat, you know. And B, it is due to the logics of the specific work that was done by the activity that was led and to the constitution of this archive. So, you know, if it's a diplomatic correspondence, it was the diplomatic activity of an ambassador that led to the constitution of this specific archive. If it was the registry of slave trade, it was the activity of the trader, for instance, or the tax collector, or whatever. So there's always a logics that is linked to an activity that produces the fact that these documents are in the order that they are, and they are together, no? So we have to contextualize, and once you have contextualized that, and once you use those data that maybe, you know, that you have access to internet, but you use them as archives, then it enables you to objectify your empirical source. And you know, this is what makes it also more rigorous, you know, to use. Another thing that I did is also interviews through WhatsApp, but it was not live interviews, but it was more people who send me voice messages. And there's something very interesting with voice messages, is that people who send voice messages, they can send very long voice messages. They can just, you know, open, you know, make you listen to slogans in the street. Sometimes they're running and they're talking at the same time, so you can feel their body at the end of the day, you know. Sometimes they're speaking very quietly because it's late, or for instance, like a girl who's shut down in her room because her parents don't want her to go and demonstrate, and she's letting me a voice saying how pissed off she is not being able to go out, and her voice, she's, you know, like very quiet. At other moments, she's shouting in the streets with her friends. So then you can feel her body behind the voice. So then, you know, it's very digital, but then you have also access to another temporality and another materiality that even through the digital. So it's not, again, it's not black and white. It's not either you're in presence and then you lead the interviews, or you're out, you know, online, and then everything is becoming immaterial, no? And just to say about the fact that, so this is a very, very, very important point that you're raising, the fact that this is my very personal narrative of the uprisings, and it's the narrative of someone who works at a distance because she cannot go back, and has so a very specific stand against this regime. Axiologic neutrality doesn't mean, you know, being in the middle. It means being objectifying enough the conditions of production of your knowledge so that it's not entrapped in some biases. So when you objectify also the biases, it can help just creating this awareness in your readership can help producing more rigorous, I think, narrative. And the important thing was that, as I say first, so if it's the aim is creating a collective story of these uprisings that goes beyond, you know, what we each have on our walls, then I have to really affirm my subjectivity since the start, because I cannot produce, you know, this kind of narrative, but at the same time present it as an objective, totally, you know, looking from above explanation of the facts. It's one very subjective narrative, and it has to be so. So since the start of the book until the end, I say I in the first person, and my subjectivity is very present. I talk about my family, I talk about my other books, I talk about also personal memories. There is one chronicle that has nothing to do, it's not a date of the uprising, but it's the anniversary of my aunt, the execution of my aunt. But I link it, of course. It's a way for me, this chronicle is a way to look at the concept of martyrdom and political enemy, and see how also political resistance has shifted in terms of its ideological roots in Iran. But I think that the way to be, you know, the more neutral or the more objective is the way to be sometimes very subjective, so that you objectify the subjective conditions of production of this knowledge. So this was extremely important for me. And for the second question, I forgot.
So my question was first, I mean, you were saying from Foucault's insight, right? As you were saying, you have moments of eruption which come precisely when you have impositions happening. So this is precisely at those moments where you have possibilities of eruption. So I'm saying that I'm trying to imagine, you know, why is in Iran the protests which are basically happening by a particular regime? Now that the regime has a legitimacy in certain traditions of knowledge and theology. Now why are not those protests directed, you know, one-on-one against that body of thought, or that body of
that's exactly because also what I told you. So this is very, I think it's absolutely crucial question, because so you talked about the Shah regime, Mohammad Reza Shah, and actually, well, it's a monarchy. The Shah dynasty, the Pahlavi dynasty, lasted quite long, right? It was from the 1920s to the 79, so to 60 years, no? The father and the son. The paradox, the great paradox, socio-political, is that in 1979, the Iranian society like massively was, in terms of its culture and values, very religious and traditional, was compatible with the theocratic project of Khomeini. In my book, I unfold how, to my view, the Khomeini's process of state building after the revolution and project were fascist. In the political science sense of the term fascist, there was a massive youth movement. There was this state-directed economy. There was the labeling of opponents as enemies. There was the more important than everything. There was the binding of legal, extra-legal, and paralegal processes that work together. So there are many really factors that allow me to say that this was a fascist state formation project. But massively, the Iranian society traditional values were compatible with that. They were not against. And one of the, for instance, one of the paradoxes of Iran and Iran's success, the Islamic Republic's success, is how separating the girls from the boys, doing school in non-mixity, and having the compulsory veil for the school girls, since the age of 6, actually allowed a lot of traditional families, rural families, to send their girls to school. So it creates massive access to alphabetization and to school for girls, where those families didn't want to put their girls in the schools of the Shah, which were mixed, which were maybe corrupting their traditional Islamic Shia values. So this was in 1979, and it's very, very important. And the big paradox is that what the Islamic Republic, what the theocratic state has managed to do incredibly, is to secularize its own population at an impressive scale. So you have a population that in 79 is compatible with the ideas of Khomeini, and today is massively secularized, massively rejects theocracy. And this is, how come? They've all these people, 80% of the population has been schooled under the Islamic Republic. They have had classes of Quran. They have had the national anthem every day. They have had, religious classes. They have had all these basijis, surveilling their schools, and the letters they were obliged to write to the shaheeds, to the martyrs, etc. And throughout that, they have become this massively secularized society. So I'm touching upon that in my book as well, is how there has been a drastic change and shift within the Iranian society, and also how the values of the global middle class have penetrated different stratas of society, and are shared also among the urban poor today. And this is so now, 40 years after the institution of the Islamic Republic, actually what was the basis, the clientele also of this regime, is now against very, very widely and openly also against the Islamic Republic as a set of also social cultural values. So this is very, I think this is a very interesting lesson to learn from. And another thing that is very important, and a reason why also, and this is, the book starts with the killing of a woman, a Kurdish woman, but it starts on the figure of the young man. It's not only about women. I'm saying that since the first page of the book. It's about men and women. And I'm looking at, in the first chronicle, I'm looking at this figure of the Mostaz Afan, of the, what you can call, of the wretched of the herd, the one who is dispossessed. So the Mostaz Afan, the Mostaz Afin, which is a Quranic kind of way of putting, the one who's dispossessed, the dispossessed, is the hero of the 79 revolution. He's the one for which the Islamic Revolution happened. He's the one who has been expelled in the shanty towns by the Shah agrarian reform and the Shah imperialistic, very capitalistic state reform. So he's the hero of the revolution, and then he becomes the figure, the hero of the Iran-Iraq war through the figure of the martyr. I don't know if you have looked how on the walls of Iranian cities, this figure of the martyr is very present. And he's precisely, this young man, the one who becomes, after decades of ruling of the Islamic Republic, one of the main threats to society through the figure of the delinquent. And this is very important. There has been a major shift. And the urban poor, the dispossessed, who have been in the streets from 2017 to 2019, the one who did the uprisings, were crushed as hell, even more than in the women life freedom uprisings. During 3 days, the Sepah sent their tanks, they shut down the internet, and they killed more than like a few hundred people. We don't know how many. So it was like a bloody repression, because they don't hesitate 1 second in killing the poor, in killing the urban poor and the young men. And in order to reinstitute terror, they executed young protesters who were all belonging to the working class. They were all working class, some of them ethnic minority. So it's a state policy that goes to what? That goes to the fact that the Islamic Republic has been one of the best students of the MFI and the structural adjustment policies, and is a very neoliberal state in its functioning. And women life freedom, the life is also, for ecology, against extractivism. And as I say, the urban poor joined the women life freedom movement because there was a very important fight for economic dignity within this movement. So the thing is that the Islamic Republic is not a defender of the wretched of the earth. It's not a socialist state. It's a very, very neoliberalized state owned by, an economic, military, securitarian apparatus that is the Sepah, the Guardians of the Revolution. So it's against this apparatus, and also fringes of the ruling clergy, of course. But it is against this very state, system that the people of Iran are fighting, and that's why they're finding their, as I say, language of revolt to name and confront and challenge the ones who are making their life miserable. But as for more traditional values, so then that you have the clergy, but the clergy is a vast social political group, and as much as they all benefited, of course, from the Islamic Republic, very, very much in terms of redistribution, also re-privatization of everything that has been nationalized during the 79 revolution. As much as they are doing this, there is a tradition of the clergy of, not wanting to interfere in the public affairs, so that Iranians know that the theocratic ideology is the expression of a very specific radical fringe of the Iranian clergy. It's not the expression of all, of course, of radical of the clergy or Islam. And one last thing is that the veil, the experience of being veiled or in public or not veiled, is not an experience, has nothing to do with some kinds of othering for Iranian, women and men. Contrary to, for instance, in the West, they say that it's for protecting secularism that they're against the veil. But the truth is that they're against the veil because they're xenophobic. Because the veil is the veil is worn by people who are not white at the basis. So there is a mix, there is at the level of values, there is a discourse, but then there is the reality of xenophobia. In Iran, the veil is organic. There is no othering. So someone who wears the veil, there are mothers, our grandmothers, our school teachers, whatever. So it's not, there is no, this mixing doesn't appear. You don't have to other, there is no construction of a figure of the other. So this is very important to understand that how the veil cannot be instrumentalized, how the fights of Iranian women and men against compulsory veil cannot be instrumentalized in other contexts where there is a construction of an ethnic minority that is built as an other, no?
Fiction and the reality. So as you directed a movie also, my question is on visual art and cinema. How, because we have seen in Iranian cinema the representation of women and these protest movements is not visible enough to show. Like we seen in the Abbas Kiarostami movies, there are some dots which we can connect otherwise, but there is not, I mean, clear-cut presentation of those things which are actually happening in reality. So how you see these challenges and how we can differentiate from the distance the difference between the fiction and the reality, especially in visual arts and cinema.
And systematic oppression of women in Iran. How do you perceive the future of women's rights and the political freedom within the country? And attaching to it, the second part of the question is, what factor do you think, both internal and external, could influence a shift towards greater social and political change? And what role do you think international pressure, grassroots movements, and cultural shift might play in this process, or are they just for the namesake?
Was what happened in 1979 was the coming together of very different revolutionary projects. You know, there were a lot of like Marxist groups, there was the left, there were ethnic minorities, national minorities in Kurdistan, and then there were people who were against the Shah, there were people who wanted an Islamic Republic and they knew exactly what they wanted, there were people who said Islamic Republic, but they had no idea of, you know, what it could really mean in practice. So all these people came together behind the figure of Ruhollah Khomeini. They trust him because he was an old wise man who had said that he would respect, you know, the freedom and of people to choose, etc. And they wanted the departure of the Shah, so they kind of united, you know, behind Ruhollah Khomeini. Why? Because, as you said, there was so much political and crushing and absence of freedom and repression inside Iran, that it was only this exiled opponent outside who could, you know, embody an alternative. And what happened was, of course, the seizure of power by the Khomeini's fascist project. So now the Iranian society, I think, is like also learning from, like, there is this almost like trauma politics of we are not putting our differences aside to join for the same aim, which would be to change the regime, because we don't know what will come next and it can be worse. And because this is the learning also of the 79 revolution. The Shah regime was really bad in terms of political repression, but it was nothing compared to what happened in the Islamic Republic, where there were hundreds of prisoners, or maybe thousands of prisoners, political prisoners in the jails of the Shah. There were hundreds of thousands of political prisoners in the jails of the Islamic Republic. The level scales of torture, the level scales of political executions and massacres that happened after the revolution under the Islamic Republic have nothing to do, it's 1 to 10 in comparison to what happened, which was bad, during the Shah. But we don't know this history because, as I said, you know, it's a red line and it wasn't crossed that much, etc. So if we put things in perspective, there is this idea that it's very difficult for the Iranian society to go beyond this idea, you know, the trauma of putting your eggs in the same bag, as you say, you know. in France. So another problem, I think, and it's very clear when you see Syria today, is that there is what I call the politics of suspicion. That is one of the quiet, techniques of repression and surveillance by authoritarian states today. That is to induce suspicion among people towards each other, among different opponents groups, towards each other on social media, using social media, so that if there was unity of different groups and ideas in fall 2022, this unity has been dismantled, has dissolved in internal fights created also by a lot of this politics of suspicion, of fearing each other, accusing each other of being spies, etc., etc. And this was also the case in Syria, in the Syrian opposition. And what the Syrian case shows is that this kind of the almost existential incapacity to create unity that is so harmful to any kind of resistance is something that also dissolves to some point when the power falls, when the authoritarian power falls. So I think that in the light of that, this politics of suspicion being a product of techniques of power, what we can say is that maybe we shouldn't expect unity to happen first as a condition of changing this power or fighting against this power, but that kind of unity can only be attained once the politics of suspicion of authoritarian power are either deactivated because we are aware of them, but we are not here in Iran, or they are no longer here because the power itself is no longer there. No? So I think that what we have to do now is to practice kind of a radical trust, a radical kind of unity, being radical tolerance in terms of talking with a lot of people. Like, for instance, as far as I'm concerned, when people say, no, don't work with this person because it is said that she receives money from here and she said that, and I'm just like, we have to stop this because this is exactly where we are at the mercy of the politics of suspicion, and we are not being aware of them enough. So we have to really, I think, work on ourselves as civil society to include these techniques of government in our analysis of state violence. No, and the other thing that we have, I think, that may be really helpful for the future of any kind of resistance in Iran is at a global level, if this this way of framing and thinking these neoliberal, authoritarian, patriarchal, militarized states matures into a strong political theory that can name them, that can understand their functioning, and also think about a strategic resistance. And then Iran would follow that path. And I think that as far as I'm concerned, for me right now, it's, for instance, the global transnational feminists in South America, the movements like Ni Una Menos, what is happening also in Mexico. These are really the movements that articulate together anti-extractivist, fights, and also gender equity, and fight against this neoliberal system of indebting the population, and authoritarian trends, masculinist authoritarian trends. And so I think that they are, maybe showing a way and trying to find some ways of articulating this, and then this will circulate, and we have to reappropriate this thought at different levels here in India, in the Middle East, and fight against the state powers that are, we don't have a strong alternative yet, but I think that it can only be found globally, I have the impression. I don't know, this is where I stand. Excuse me. So Kiarostami also did this wonderful movie called Close Up. I don't know if
Close
you've
Up,
seen
yeah.
it.
Yes.
Yes. So in terms of fiction and reality and how actually you can create fiction with real material and fictionalize reality, but it says something about a kind of a truth of our social reality. I think he went very far with this movie. Although in other movies, I think you're right, there is this idea of, but it was also how Iranian cinema has been, the history of Iranian cinema has been very much linked to the revolution and the post-revolution. So we cannot it's not, just an art that can be seen also independently. It has to be contextualized within how Iranian cinema was used as a way to create collective memory around the war with Iraq. It was used also as a way to build, large-scale kind of images that will circulate and unite the nation after the revolution. There was a lot of censorship, but also a lot of efforts by the cinematographers to try to do their art, albeit there is a lot of, although there is a lot of censorship, and maybe this kind of poetry, poetical cinema that doesn't say much about the social and political realities is also a form of resistance itself, because it's a way of not going where maybe the state wants you to go, in terms of building a strong, propagandist cinema. So
How was your personal experience?
So my personal experience is that I am not talking about fiction per se, but I will use mise en scène. I will stage encounters. So it's not fiction; it's true encounters that really took place, and so it's documentary material. But I'm staging them very much, and I'm making it visible that I'm staging them. Not to make as if it was like really, the camera that is. So I think that between fiction and reality, there is this idea of the staging, but making it a little bit visible as a way of being honest also, and showing your. But in this sense, I feel also like personally, if you ask I feel very close to that kind of fiction that has a level of staging artificiality in terms of aesthetics. So you see, it's not documentary, but is going towards like a psychological truth and rigor, and I think both can be attained at the same time. And this is the kind of a cinema I'm trying to develop.
So we can wind. So to express our gratitude, and ma'am, it was an honor to have you here. And to express our gratitude, I would like to call Anushka for the vote of thanks.
So on behalf of Beyond Binaries, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Makaremi for her confounding reflections on the topic. A big thanks to our student community and the faculty for sharing their valuable insights and queries with ma'am. As said by ma'am and has been aptly remarked by Professor Amritya Sen as well, that resistance to injustice must run on two things, that is anger and reasoning. This is this frustrations from the poor living condition that can actually drive us to take action and can help us to develop a logical and lasting understanding of the root causes of those issues. It is this tradition of critical thinking that Beyond Binaries always swears unwavering obedience to. Before bidding farewell to Dr. Makaremi, I request Pragya to present her a book written by Rabindranath Tagore as a token of appreciation. Great admirer of Inar as well.
Ma'am.
There is another announcement. We have also put up a stall in the CPS open area.
It's then
There, so you can get the books written by ma'am at a special student discount rate. Thank you everybody for joining this session. Hope to see you.